Howdy y'all, welcome to Reading Note Names with Mr. J. This is part 2. We're talking about the bass clef in this video. So if you missed my first video about how to read treble clef, go back and watch that. But this is how to read note names in the bass clef, also called the F clef. The F clef is called the F clef because it indicates notes on the F line. There's a big dot here and two little dots, which all center around this line here. Every note which lives on that line, so if I follow it over, has the name F, and you'll see that later on, when I got a note that lives on that line, I labeled it with an F. There are 5 lines and 4 spaces, just like in treble clef. There's a bottom line, second, third, fourth, and fifth, 5 lines, and there are 4 spaces in between them. 1, 2, 3, and 4. There are 4 spaces in between each line, in between the lines total. Just like for treble clef, when our notes ascend, we go upwards through the alphabet. When our notes descend, we go downwards through the alphabet. Ascend means to get higher on our staff. Descend means to get lower on our staff. So all of our notes in the top example are ascending. They go from lowest to highest. All of our notes in bottom are going from highest to lowest. All right, so let's label these with some letters here. If I start with my F and I go up 1 note, notice that I get 1 position higher. So I will start with F down in my alphabet chart and I will ascend by a letter. So that makes this one a G. Every note which lives in this space will be labeled with a G. If I start with this G and ascend by another note, I start with G in my alphabet chart and ascend a letter, and that lands me at an A. Okay. If I start back at this F and descend by a letter, or by a note rather, I start at F in my alphabet chart and I descend by a letter here to the letter E. Notice that E is just a letter in the alphabet before F. So I bet that my next note down will be a letter before E. If I think through my alphabet, the letter before E is D. And realizing that pattern, I can now fill in the rest of my letters. The letter before D is a C. The letter before C is B. The letter before B is A. And now here things get a little bit tricky. When I get to A, my pattern has to repeat. So notice that here I've arrived at A again. If I go down another letter in my pattern, I arrive to the letter G. And then I just continue following that pattern downwards. So let's do a little bit of comparison. This note is on my top line. If I look at my prior example here, this note is on the top line and has the letter A. So all notes which live on this top line will have the letter A. If I look at this note, it's in the top space. Comparing it to my prior example, this note is in the top space. It will have the same letter. This note has a G, so this one will have a G. My F is already labeled and is indicated again by the dots on my F clef. So if I keep going down the alphabet in my pattern here, if I start at F and go down a letter, I find the letter E. If I go down another letter from E, I find the letter D. If I do this correctly, not only should it follow my pattern, meaning that my notes are what I expect them to be and I don't skip any letters like from D to B or from D to A, but also they should match. So my D here should look like my D here. My C should look like my C, and so on and so forth. That brings us to a helpful tool here. We have some memory tricks that will help us remember the names of our lines and spaces. Our bottom line is G. Our second line is B. Our third is D. And then we have F and A. If you create sentences where each word starts with one of those letters, that helps you to remember the names and the order of each line and space. So let's start with the lines. We have a G, B, D, F, A. If I start my first one, I could say, good burritos don't fall apart. I could also say, gummy bears do fine always. Gummy bears do fine always. I could even say Grumpy Bernie doesn't feel all right, but that was a little tricky to remember, so I use it because I like the Grumpy Bernie meme. It's up to you. And for my spaces, my bottom space here is an A, and then I have C, and then E, and then G. So the one that most people know is all cows eat grass. But one of my students came up with this one that I really like, and it is angry chihuahuas eat grandmas. And most people seem to have a really easy time remembering that. Angry chihuahuas eat grandmas. So those are the ways we remember the names of our lines and spaces in the bass clef, also called the F clef. Thanks for watching, and please watch my next video about the grand staff.